Certification Partners. I'm here today for our latest CIW webinar, Advanced HTML5 and CSS3 Specialist. Today's presenters are Todd Hopkins, our VP of Operations and Product Development. We're also with Stephen Schneider, our CIW Certification Specialist, and Patrick Lane, one of our primary authors on our recent new release that we're going to be discussing today. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, a couple of quick notes first before we get going. I want to point out for all of our attendees that you are currently in listen-only mode. You're muted by default to help keep the background noise to minimum so everyone can hear our presenters clearly. We are recording today's presentation, and we will post that on our website soon. And the PDF of the presentation will also be up there available for download probably within a few days. Typically takes us a couple of days to get that taken care of. Todd, you want to go ahead and get started?
You bet. Thank you, Lisa. Welcome, everybody. We're excited to talk to you today about our new certification program and course that is, the course has just been recently released. It's the Advanced HTML5 and CSS3 Specialist. We're going to talk about the web development trifecta as we go throughout today's session, and it's good to have Stephen and Patrick with us. We'll go ahead and begin. Today's agenda will cover a number of things. We're going to have a brief introduction of who CIW and certification partners are, and then we'll go right into the topics listed here on the screen: nature of the web, talking about HTML5 and CSS3, what our approach is to this, and then Patrick will talk a lot about the core topics in this course and this program to help us understand what we'll be seeing as you start to teach the course. Then we'll talk about what the course materials are. There's a lot of new updates and enhancements that we've made in the curriculum and online tools. We'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about ending up with positioning of this specialist program, job skills progression, and those types of things. So we'll get right into it. A little bit about us. Again, I'm Todd Hopkins. I'm the Vice President of Operations and Product Development here at Certification Partners. My responsibility is to make sure we're building good programs, keeping them current, and providing good learning resources for our instructors and those that want to work towards the certification programs that we're building. Stephen Schneider is our certification specialist. He's out there helping teachers learn these materials and preparing to teach them in classes and in their organizations. And Patrick Lane is the author of this course and has been an educator for a number of years. Welcome, gentlemen. We appreciate you being here today.
Thanks, Todd. I appreciate being here as well. It's a great course. I think I'm excited about it.
It is. It is. Patrick's done a fabulous job in writing it, by the way. And that's not a bias in any way, shape, or form, is it, Patrick? So let's get into a little bit about CIW. We are a skills-based organization and education standard. We look at the overall approach to the certification is we want you to know the technology to be able to obviously pass the certification, but we also want you to be able to have the skills and abilities you need to perform once you get the job and to help you get the job that you're seeking and help you along your career. We're focused on being vendor neutral, but we're not at vendor absent, meaning we profile the best vendor applications on in our curriculum when appropriate, and we want to put you on a lifelong learning path as opposed to being stuck with, you know, a vendor comes out with a new application or a new piece of hardware, and now you have to go get certified on that. We want to teach you the theory and methodology and application of what is beneath the applications itself. We use open source applications and those types of things. And we are globally accepted. We've delivered about 1 million courses worldwide, and we have well over 65,000 certified individuals today in today's IT environment. We have a pathway, and this will continue to grow and modify, but we start with our Foundations Associate, helping people begin to move from a consumer role of the Internet into more of a producing role in the Internet. And that's where our current course today will be, is moving you from that foundational level into more of the higher levels and higher order responsibilities. What we'd like to do now is talk a little bit about the nature of web and web designers. And Stephen, if you want to take over at this point.
Sure. Yeah, let's just, and basically all we want to do was just take just a couple of minutes and take a look at where we are with the web today, and talk just for a minute why HTML5 has come about and is important. Todd, if you go ahead and hit the next one. The web, if we look back at the beginning of when we really started surfing the web back in the 90s or even before, but when we really started using graphical user interface browsers to take a look at some of the stuff on the web, and then to where we are with it today, the web is more, it's very interactive, it's very collaborative. We're working more now in groups, so we're able to do a lot more with the resources that we have available to us than we were able to do 10, 20 years ago. And it's always evolving, and it's gonna keep evolving. So staying up with the types of technologies that are out there become even more important. The web is becoming more open source. There's a lot of tools out there, and these tools obviously are becoming cloud-based, right, to where we can actually go in and have access to more resources than we have. Go ahead, Todd. And so if we look at then some of the characteristics of what the web is doing for us today, and how we need to create these websites. Responsive design, meaning that we need to be designed with the mobile environment in our mind, right? Because now we're not necessarily a society anymore where we're looking at our websites on our computer, on our desktop anymore. We're going into a store and we're pulling up products on our phones or on our tablets and looking to see if we can find them at a more affordable cost at another store or at an internet-based store if possible. And so how does that information appear on our mobile screen? Whether we're holding it vertical or whether we're holding it horizontal, the site needs to adapt to its environment, okay, and that's what we're really meaning by responsive design. How is our information coming across given the browser, given the platform that it's running in, and the position. More and more, it used to be just a few years ago, we were putting rounded, beveled edges on everything, giving that three-dimensional type of look to our websites, and now we've transitioned back into a flat design, a flat user interface. And that's becoming more. It also used to be a few years ago that we would teach web design. We would say we want all of our content, right, to basically be within one browser window. We don't want people to have to scroll to find information. And now with the way that our mobile devices work, with our phones and tablets, scrolling has become the primary source of navigation. It's very easy for us to swipe our finger across the screen and change all of the information that's on there to move either up or down. Or I love the $5 word parallax scrolling, right? So no longer are we bound by scrolling up and down, but we can scroll sideways. And that continual navigation of being able to scroll sideways is adding a lot more usability to us on web design, especially when we're talking about mobile design. So that's something that we need to be able to take into consideration. And that helps us also with minimizing our navigation requirements. As if you've got really heavy fingers like I do, and you're on my phone or even on my daughter's tablet, when I try and hit some navigation links when I'm surfing the web, I always hit something else. And so being able to minimize navigation, make it more user-friendly, right, to get from one spot to another, is a key feature that we are taking into consideration with our design now. and a grid style layout. That's very popular these days as far as being able to have a cut and dried layout for our pages that are going to be in there. And then of course form elements. Form elements, if you've filled out forms online lately, you've seen that they've got a new crisp, cleaner look and feel to them, and the elements are more adaptive to the way that we're using the web. And that again goes hand in hand with what we're considering for our mobile design. Being able to have easy access to required information that goes into a particular form. Okay, Todd, go ahead. So why really take a look at HTML5 and CSS3? Well, we've put that question out to experts that are in the field. Todd, you can go ahead and flip over again. We asked developers, hey, what skills do you think is important for people to be using? How important is it to learn code? Why can't we just go out and learn an application? Go ahead, Todd. Let's take a look and see what they said. 70% of respondents, have come back and told us, it's important that you know code. You got to know what's going on in the background and being able to go in and modify code. 25% basically said that, well, a basic understanding of being able to use HTML is important and will do you well in the workforce. And only about 5% said, you really don't need to know code. There's applications out there that do everything for you. Okay, Todd. We also had comments, that were brought back in it, or that have been presented in the past about learning, the importance of learning HTML. And basically, these are professionals who are out there in the field in the web design, and they're saying basically, you need to know code. Code is the tool that you're going to end up using more than anything else. And we do the code, we go in and modify the code, we validate the code, and we've got something to take a look at. It's also very interesting when we talk about, why staying up with current trends and taking this next step for HTML5. In the United States, if you take a look at the Fortune 500 companies that are out there, as of last year, 30% of those Fortune 500 companies were using fully HTML5 coding and practices on their websites. So this is about 153 Fortune 500 companies, and that 153, as far as outgross profits off of their websites, were greater than roughly 161 companies that were using XHTML coding. Okay, and so I said about 30% using HTML5, so about 32.2% using XHTML transitional, and about 16% roughly that are still using HTML 4.01. And these, we're going to see this trend grow just like we did in the browsers a few years ago. The best browser was forever increasing in its rankings, and the same is going to be true with HTML5. We're going to see more and more adoption of it, and so having the skill sets of understanding how to use it most effectively is going to become very important as far as working for businesses and business sites. Okay, Todd. So taking a look at our approach, what do we feel is important about getting skill sets out to people for employability? And so our objectives with this course are going to be implement HTML5 coding, use it as much as possible, and understand its elements and the attributes that are going to go along with it. And use CSS3. HTML5 is really dependent on CSS as an integral part of making interactive sites. And so we're going to use CSS3 heavily throughout the course. And we're going to integrate JavaScript coding into pages because, as Patrick's going to talk about in just a minute, the interaction with HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript. Now, we're not saying everybody needs to be an expert with JavaScript. There's a ton of resources and libraries out there that will have JavaScript code that allow us to be able to integrate into our websites. But having a base understanding of what JavaScript is and what it will do will help us immensely as we go further with it in our career. And using the HTML5 and CSS to create both traditional sites, but then also the sites that work in the mobile environment. You know, I think there's still this argument out there. We have a traditional website and we have a mobile platform site, and that's all right. But more and more we're seeing this transition of having, if we can have a functioning site that has the capability to render itself in a traditional environment as well as the mobile environment, then we're really getting the more bang for our buck. We're really being able to have a useful site. Okay. All right, Todd. HTML5 and CSS3, you know, it was several years ago, the W3C said HTML5 is going to be the only focus for the next generation of HTML. Okay, we went off, you know, there for a while. Oh, it was going to be XML, and we were going to bridge the gap between HTML and XML by using XHTML, and that was our standard for a long time. Okay, and then comes along our HTML5, which is kind of including and enveloping all of these technologies, various technologies. But with HTML5 and the use of CSS, we've got expanded elements that we can use that are going to be, again, more descriptive of the type of content that we're going to be using, which is going to help us create more of a semantic site, right? So extensive use of CSS3, including the ability to use transitions and menus. Okay, more again, this will simplify and make more user-friendly our navigation for our pages that we're creating. The ability to validate code is brought into HTML, and even especially in forms, we've got new input elements in forms, again, kind of like I mentioned a few minutes ago, as far as being able to be more descriptive for the type of information that's in there. They're easier to validate because they'll be looking for specific types. We can set to look for specific types of information that we input into that form field. So, you know, we'll have more complete forms without error. We can do that validation in form, actually. Okay. All right. And then, of course, we had talked about this responsive web design, being able to work on various platforms. All right. Okay, Todd. So
thanks, Stephen.
we want.
That was.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say we've kind of set the space for why HTML5 is out there, the role it's going to play in the future, and we want to take a look at the core topics that the course is presenting. What students will actually be learning as they're going through the course, and we're going to let Patrick come in and talk to us, take us on a tour of the course basically, and some of the highlights. Patrick.
Hello, Stephen. Thank you, and thank you to everyone for joining. My name is Patrick Lane, and I helped develop the course. And I say help develop it because I was able to take objectives, you know, that were essentially given to me, you know, from CIW in the industry, and then develop a course around it. And so, you know, the Advanced HTML5 and CSS3 course is the result of that, and much of it is based on developing mobile sites. So before I begin, I just want to say a few overview topics. You know, when I look at the entire course as a whole, and some of the concepts I think that are important for all of you to know. Number one is we focus on the web development trifecta that Stephen had mentioned, and trifecta is just a term that we're using because we haven't been able to find a better one. And it just means the three technologies of HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript. And notice I'm just saying CSS, and that is because we still use a lot of, you know, CSS1, CSS2, and a few of the new modules of CSS3. That are, you know, currently adopted by browsers. And when we look at those three, you know, main technologies, JavaScript probably is going to come up as the one that may be intimidating. But the JavaScript is used for, specifically in this course, the HTML5 APIs, and that's an application programming interface. And you want to look at it and compare it to technologies of the past, it's really that the W3C wants HTML5, JavaScript, and CSS to be able to replace some of the old tools that we used to use, like Flash. Basically, one of the main goals of this trifecta is to get rid of plugins, and the reason is because it's sucking up battery power out of cell phones and iPads. And if you want to, there's an amazing article that was written by Steve Jobs several years ago that explains everything perfectly. It's called Thoughts on Flash, and it's by Steve Jobs. And if you read that, you will understand where we're coming from in this course perfectly. And so I think that's one of the main things. The second thing is JavaScript. It is intimidating, but you only use it for these HTML5 APIs. And so it is essentially code that we're providing that is going to be used in the labs. And so as an instructor, if you're concerned about your JavaScript knowledge, I would say, based on what I have done, I would say based on the people that have been taking this course already, just in our testing, if you were to go through the course by yourself, go through the labs before you teach, I believe you will know the JavaScript you need to know, because we're really just going through and defining, identifying main parts of the code, but most of it, or all of it, is provided for you. And so I don't want anyone to worry about that, because you don't need to worry about that. It will be provided for you. And then, as Stephen had mentioned, there's so many resources. And in the past, I'm not a JavaScript expert, and I work with other people whenever I do. I've worked with 2 consultants on this course who are JavaScript experts. In the past, in projects that I've worked on developing online material, I worked with other JavaScript experts, and so I would ask them for the code, and then they would provide it to me. Then I go out and I find that they got the code from hundreds of different JavaScript sites that provide examples and code that you can freely use. And so, to a large part, using JavaScript nowadays is going out and copying and pasting it from sites that allow you to do that, because consider JavaScript an open source technology where everyone is jumping in to help. And so I don't think you're going to run into trouble with that. And so I'd like to start going through the trifecta then and how we work it, because we focus on developing mobile sites. This course is not an encyclopedia of the different HTML5 elements that are new and the attributes that are new. It does cover that, but it covers what is necessary for the W3C's goal of creating a mobile web, to creating sites that will work on any screen size. So we're mainly focusing on the mobile aspect of it. So as we go through HTML5, you're going to be learning about a lot of different elements, but these elements are geared towards these mobile sites. There are plenty of sites on the internet where you can go to learn more about every single specific element and property that exists. The same thing is with CSS. As I said before, you'll be doing CSS 1, 2, and 3, depending on what function you need for your site. And so the same goes with JavaScript. We're going to be using mostly just APIs. The HTML5 APIs, we'll be using JavaScript with those so that you can perform some of the newer functions that don't require a lot of plugins or more complex code as in the past. And so if you're looking for a list of HTML5 elements and properties, a list of all the CSS3 modules and all the different rules declarations that would be used within that, or JavaScript, all of the different methods and functions. And there are plenty of sites that have the laundry list of all of the different types that are available for you. But we are focusing, as I said, on the W3C's main goal of creating a mobile web, one that is responsive to screen sizes, that sites that are intelligent, they're going to find out, okay, regardless of what size screen this person has, my website's going to work on it. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. The students are going to love it, and I think you're going to like it a lot too, because, well, we'll be talking more in just a moment about flexible websites and framing that Stephen had mentioned. And so you'll find that if you know HTML right now, this isn't too much of a stretch for you. So the first site, the first page here is Core Topics, HTML5 Essentials. We're going through and teaching you the main differences of HTML5. You do need to know some basic coding. You do need to know HTML. And you should know, CSS. And Stephen, you're probably going to be better at explaining this part. But you and I have had discussions about how much do instructors and students need to know. And essentially, they just need to know the basics of HTML5, how it works, and the basics of CSS. And how that works, and they would need they would need hands-on experience with that too. If they go into this class and without knowing it, it's going to be difficult for them, and that is why, as Todd will be discussing later, SDA is important as a prereq, or knowledge that is similar to that. It's just as instructors, you'll have a hard time pulling those students in and keeping them engaged and not getting them lost. But with HTML5, as I said before, we're going to be really focusing on mobile devices, this web development trifecta, the HTML5 structure elements, huge, because that is really, in many ways, what is giving you the the site that's going to work on different screens, because they resize as you move them around, as you'll find out. And then we also talk about some of the cool new HTML5 elements, but if you've done SDA, you already know those, video and audio. Next, cascading style sheets. We also talk about that. And it is important to know that with CSS and HTML, we do teach some of the basics. We felt we had to in order to get students up to where they need to be. With cascading style sheets, we have a lesson that's just dedicated to teaching them the basics of it. So they're going to learn style sheets, style guides, the terms and syntax, applying styles, page layout. If you have experience, with CSS and style sheets, you're going to do fine here. But we felt it was very important to review it because we're going to be taking them to the next level. And so, Todd, if you could change the page, we'll go into CSS3 Essentials. So they're going to be learning the basics of CSS1 and CSS2, how that works, and then we'll be introducing some of the different features of the CSS3 modules. And we're going to be working once again with the Habitat for Humanity site. And so students are going to start out in this course working with a traditional desktop website. And the reason is because it's, well, it's easier because we have a larger screen, we have more real estate to work with for the learning experience. And what they'll be doing toward the end of the course is converting these traditional websites into mobile websites. And so with CSS3, we'll just be teaching them about some of the new things, some of the back selectors and properties, the backgrounds. You can have multiple backgrounds, borders, which is just huge, because now what you can do is, if you see this volunteer and advocate, these buttons that are on the screen here, these were actually created using CSS3. And so no longer do you have to create images and then insert images as buttons. You just type out your code, and then you just can create essentially a border around your text, and voila, you created a good-looking button. And you can see here there's also a shadow effect as well. Students will be creating this site that you see on the screen. And that is related to the font effects and the text effects. So next, Todd. Furthermore, with these CSS3 techniques, we're going to take them into 2D and 3D transformations. This stuff is really fun, and there are uses for it. I think you'd have to be somewhat creative to use them, but the main thing is that you will see that they are replacing Flash, a perfect replacement for it. With the 2D and 3D transformations, what the students will be doing is essentially taking an image, rotating it. Now, if you look down at the bottom, you'll see the image on the bottom left. Yes, there's a heading 1, heading 2. Well, you can see that paragraph text. What we did is we added a 2D transformation to it. So when you put your mouse over it, it will essentially, turn. It will revolve. In this case, a full 360 degrees. It will also work on the bottom paragraph there as well. This is something that students will be building in class. I just took a screen capture of one of the labs. And 3D transformations, that is when you can take something and actually turn it around. So then it's like you're looking through it through a mirror. And there's fun things you can do with that too. But what is amazing about this is just the technological breakthrough of being able to do this so easily. We're also going to be working with animations. As you'll see, we'll be taking images and, well, any element for that matter, and you can actually move it wherever you want to on the screen, depending on how you want to activate it. So you could take the Habitat for Humanity logo, and it could actually move across the entire header and then back again. And so it's a way to get people's attention if necessary, and you can, there's different ways of activating it, and so you'll be learning about that too. User interfaces, that is huge. If you look up in the upper right-hand corner of the Habitat for Humanity site I've included, it says choose a search engine. You put your mouse over that, and then this user interface pops up, and it's Bing, Google, Yahoo. You will be shocked at how simple that was to create. And in the old days, it was very difficult to create menus. You often had to create images and then piece them together, and then use scripting languages to actually get them to form a pop-up menu or a drop-down menu. Well, this is done with CSS3. It's so cool. I think you will love these technologies when you go through the course. Okay, Todd. Now here is JavaScript, and I believe we have 2 slides on this. We do discuss JavaScript. As I said before, I don't think there's anything to be worried about, because if you go through the course, you'll understand the JavaScript that you need to know. So please go through the course and go through all the labs. But with HTML5 and JavaScript, we are essentially using it for the HTML APIs, which I'll be talking about in a bit. We are teaching HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript before the students learn the HTML5 APIs, and that's due to the fact that we want at least an understanding of the scripting languages that students are working with, and we want them to at least be able to identify the main it's almost like nomenclature of a sailboat or something, where you want to be able to look at it and go, okay, I understand that's a function, I understand that's a method, and such. And so, as I said, I'm not an expert of this, but I worked with experts, and they were able to, guide us in a very simple manner. Whereas if we just, go through the labs, we're going to know what we need to know. And so it's also in, an introduction to scripting. You understand, where you can put your script element and the different ways, such as inline scripting, if you're going to have an external JavaScript page, if you're going to embed the JavaScript. Those are some of the basics. And then the programming concepts. What is an object? What is a property? What is a method? JavaScript is a wonderful language because it's relatively easy to understand and learn. Also, we learned about JavaScript events, functions, and methods. These are just more of the nomenclature, and you learn about how each of these works. And so you're going to learn about user events. What is a user event? Well, that's just when someone clicks on something, for instance, or selects something, touches something. That's the event, and an event handler is essentially the manager, if you want to think about it, where it's going to go, okay, what do we need to do? And it's going to be the manager of how to pull off what needs to be done when the user event is activated. That's probably the easiest way to describe it. Then we talk about the functions, what's going to happen when this happens. Defining and calling functions. You'll learn that, okay, I write the word function. I always have to have the word function first, but then I can name whatever I want. You can use your own names, and so we want students to be able to understand that these are it's a very flexible language. And we also talk about using methods as functions. And so we're teaching the basics, and when you go through the labs, and just reading the book, you'll understand this well. Now we're ready for the HTML5 APIs. So they have learned the trifecta at this point, or at least enough of it to be able to do some labs. And so we're going to be focusing on many of them, including the Canvas API, offline app cache, geolocation, and drag and drop. And each of these is an application of an HTML API, and they were created by the W3C. And so geolocation, they're going to be introduced to that as well as Canvas and drag and drop, and I think maybe even the offline app cache in SDA. And in this course is when we're going to be going into more depth with it. You'll be seeing that the Canvas API has got, a lot of potential, limitless potential, I think, in many ways, and it's going to be popular, and it's already currently gaining popularity by all of the browsers. Most of them support it. The offline app cache API, that is one that you actually identify which files from an app or a website that you want to download. And so you get to control basically what's going to be downloaded, so that if an internet connection is lost, and a lot of this is due, when I read up on it with the W3C, a lot of it's when you're in a mountain region, somewhere where you lose connectivity from a 4G network or a 3G network. And so it allows you to keep your mobile site running even when they lose contact, and that's hugely important. The geolocation API, that's what allows you to use the geolocation on your phone, and so you can access that and display and use it for any purpose you want. Here, this is just a very basic. This is basically click this button to find out where you are, and so you can click that and you can see geolocation taking place. And this is used in many different HTML sites. And the drag and drop API. That also is one that we use, actually, or that I should say a certification partner uses. And I took a bunch of screen captures, actually, for the book from some of the practice exams that Stephen had done, some of the practice drag and drop activities, I should say, for practicing. I use some of those because they were the perfect example. So I always like it when you can include something that's real world that you're currently working with in the textbook. So that's wonderful. Next is the HTML5 Forms. And I received a question early on. We dedicate 2 lessons to this, to HTML5 and CSS3 forms. The reason is because think about, whenever you're on your cell phone, you're always using it to enter information of one sort or another into a form, whether it's a search, whether, well, if you're texting, of course, but when you're on websites, you're always looking for information. You have to enter in that information somehow. People do online banking on their websites. People order things from Home Depot. They download forms. There are all kinds of forms on mobile sites because you want to get directly to what you need when you need it. And so we felt it was extremely important to work with forms, and so does the W3C as well. And so we spend a lot of time with forms, using a lot of the new features that are included. And most of them, I think we include this on the next slide, actually. Todd, could you go forward? Oh, good. Here it is. A lot of it is based on validation, because we really have this fun activity where you'll see in the CIW movies that accompany this. Since most of this is interactive, the CIW movies are extremely important because you'll see, okay, here's how it works, whereas you can't see that in a PDF or a printed page. But one of the main things is making sure that someone who's walking around in a store, walking around the sidewalk, can easily enter information into a field. And so a lot of it has to do with autocomplete, and so that if they've entered anything into a form before, if they start typing out their name, my case, P.A., it will say Patrick. And so that assists them, as well as doing verification as you go along with each field. So you don't go through, fill out a field, enter, and it says, oh no, you forgot this, and you forgot that, and you forgot this and the other thing. That's called pogo sticking. And it drives users crazy. And so it's so much easier if you know these techniques that we teach in this book. So as they're going through, it's teaching them, it's showing them how to fill it out, putting things in the correct format. And so we learn about patterns where you can actually say, okay, we need the email address, in this specific pattern. We need the phone number in, a specific pattern. We can add placeholders to give them examples of what need to go in there. We can give them drop-down menus that will fill in for them automatically as soon as they just start entering in a few letters. And so there are a lot of ways that you can assist a mobile user when they're filling out a form. And this also, of course, translates quite well and perfectly to desktop and traditional websites as well. Everything we teach here works with traditional websites as well as the mobile websites. And we're ready for the next one. Great. So now we are going to focus on the mobile websites. And as I said, this is our main application of the web trifecta. So we're going to teach them about mobile design. We're going to teach them about mobile websites versus mobile apps. And if the W3C had their way, we would only have mobile websites. I think there's a lot of controversy on this, and you can, take what you want and have your own ideas on it too, because many in the industry would like it to be all websites to be mobile websites, and so that essentially you can access a site and it will work, regardless of your screen size, as you can see in the example, and it doesn't matter the platform they're viewing it on either. And so it's truly vendor neutral, which is great, as long as the browser, of course, supports it, which every day every browser, Firefox, Opera, Internet Explorer, Chrome, they're all providing support for HTML5 and CSS3. Every day they're adding more things. As you get an update for your browser, you're getting more HTML5 support. So it's getting, as it's implemented in the industry more. And so with a mobile website, it doesn't matter what browser they're accessing your site with. It doesn't matter what platform, if it's Android, if it's Windows 8 phone, or if it's an iPhone in the iOS, your site will work. And then mobile apps, of course, are specific in most cases to the actual platform that you're accessing. So if you want to download an app for, let's say, Wells Fargo app, you'd have to download a different one for your iPhone and a different one for your Windows 8 phone. And so what we're trying to do is get away from that, and that's many years down the road, I think, but it may eventually happen. Currently, you can create mobile apps with HTML5. There's two wonderful examples. YouTube created their app in HTML5, and what we're finding is more and more sites are beginning to do that, and we get a few examples. Netflix also, they created their mobile app in HTML5. So as we go to that, you'll see how much even more important this course is when you look at it that way. And so we're going to teach them some of the basics. The word down at the bottom of this page is responsive web design, RWD. That's key, because what that allows you to do is that allows your site to essentially conform to the screen size that you're viewing in. That's one part of responsive web design. And so with that, we're going to be teaching them framing and essentially the structure tags, which you learned about in HTML5, which I showed you earlier in this presentation. If you create a site using those structure tags, as you make the screen smaller, it totally adapts to it. And that's very, very important to use those structure tags. Another thing that's very important is ensuring that all your images are flexible, and you can do that as well, and we teach you how to do that. So the images just get smaller and smaller and smaller as your screen gets smaller, if that's what you would like. And so responsive web design is a big part, and responsive web design, it includes all the technologies from the trifecta, and it goes back through history, because you're going to be using older HTML elements that are still supported by HTML5. You're going to be using CSS1, CSS2, as well as some of the CSS3 modules, and you'll be using some JavaScript when you work with HTML5 APIs and when you're trying to create interactivity, or what you might consider as an application. And so that's very important. And so, Todd, is that it for my part here?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you, Patrick. That was great. There are a lot of exciting things that are in the course, and the goal is, again, to make these students and these individuals producers, and being able to implement responsive design and bring in the appropriate elements and APIs are very important. I think that there's a lot of good things that people are going to learn in this course. And so one of the things, as we move on, we're down to about 10 minutes left in our webinar, so we're going to go through these items fairly quickly, these next few items, talking about the course materials. You're going to see similar output when you're looking at the curriculum side of this. We've made some enhancements in a number of items. As we look at the courseware, this particular course is 10 lessons. Each of them will have various aspects of them, the lesson objectives, what we're looking at accomplishing in each lesson. There'll be pre-assessment questions, the regular content that will include the hands-on labs, other lecture or narrative sections that will explain what they need to do in each of those labs and how to accomplish that. There's a number of questions and optional activities and labs that they can do, and then various case studies for each lesson to help the individuals look at what they've learned in that lesson, how they would apply it in a real-world experience, and then have some discussions about those. So that's the basic courseware. The online resources, we have been moving forward with a number of things, and many of you, if you've been in any of the other courses, Site Development Associate or Internet Business Associate, you've seen some of these modifications already with our course mastery or the practice exams and those types of things, but we'll have some more of those. The movies, the movie clips, we've enhanced some more. There's some really nice learning opportunities in there to help reinforce what they'll be learning in the labs and in the book and throughout the course. We've made some modifications to the interactive online exercises. We'll show you a little bit of those in a little while. Course Mastery is going through an enhancement so that it really starts applying more of that responsive design display and functionality. And so there's a lot of good things in there. There's still, the supplemental materials will provide the lab files and appendices and other resources for both the instructor and for the student. Our practice exams, we've got the practice exams for this course, and that will continue to enhance as the exam is made available later. We will continue to increase the quantity of questions there to help prepare students for sitting the certification exam. And as we talk about the certification exam, it's being developed currently. It is expected to be released in September through all of the standard testing centers, our own CTC for those that have that available to them, or through Prometric Review. Currently, our expectation is, obviously, it's a high-stakes test. It will require the proctor to deliver that exam. We're looking at it to be approximately 75 minutes. It may go up to 90 because there's more coding questions that will be developed for this. Because as Stephen mentioned earlier in the session, how important the people in the industry, the programmers and organizations that need to do this, indicated how important knowing how to code is. And so we want to make sure there's plenty of time. There will probably be approximately 70 questions. That may go up or down, so that as we see what's available, to be able to deliver within that time period and give the individuals sufficient time for that. Obviously, there'll be single answer responses, as our other exams have been. Now to talk a little bit about some of the changes for our CIW Online and our learning resources and tools there. We've been using and building more using that trifecta that we've talked about, because we want to be, if we're going to be teaching this, we need to be using it more ourselves. So our videos are cross-platform compatible. They're built in HTML5 so they can be delivered that way. Our online exercises, you can see a couple examples here where our true false really kind of bring in more of that that design. And there is we are building in some responsive design into those as well, so that it can be delivered on multiple platforms, whether it's a mobile device or a desktop or your whatever a tablet, whatever it may be. We will have a pre-assessment as part of the online resources, so that you can kind of get a sense of where your students are or where you are if you're doing this in a self-paced environment, what you need to do to help prepare for the certification exam. This is one of the areas where we've modified the engine, moved it to a new testing engine and a little bit more of a user-friendly display. You get some instant feedback whether it's correct or incorrect. There's continued information where to go back to in the curriculum if you've gotten it wrong, and so you can do some of those types of things. You'll be able to see that. There's some new features and functionality once you get into the LMS side of the house as you go through the various components, including the pre-assessment. Interactive exercises, we've talked a little bit about that. We've modified our drag and drop, our matching, and true false, and fill in the blank. In the past, the fill in the blank where you'd have to type it in. And if you didn't get it absolutely correct, if you transposed a letter or two, it would say that it was wrong, and it was somewhat confusing. So it's more of a, we've modified that some as well. There are multiple exercises per lesson just to help reinforce the concepts that you'll be learning that Patrick has talked about, and helping identify those various terms and activities. The CIW movies, right now there's at least one per lesson, and they are focusing on the overall aspect of that lesson to help reinforce those concepts. We will continue to add movies as appropriate to the material, so that you will always be getting some new things as you go through the curriculum, and can see enhancements and growth. And as we find that there may be certain areas that might be a challenge that we're seeing in the classrooms, we want to help enable the instructors and individuals to get some additional help. So those things will be coming along as we go through. Now, as we look quickly at course mastery, this is one of the areas that has been changed. The look and feel has changed significantly. It is intended to help the student and the individual move through this quicker, and you'll be seeing more of that as you move into this. The one nice thing about this is, as this changes, it's not just this course that gets affected with these online updates. All of the courses will begin to see more of these enhancements as we go through, and as we can apply them back to each of those courses. And that takes care of our curriculum item. Stephen, do you want to quickly go through our positioning? And we want to open it up for questions. We're right at the top of the hour, but we need to make sure we answer any questions we have too.
Sure, Todd. I appreciate that. Yeah, positioning, as Patrick was mentioning as he was going through the topics overview, you know, there is, you know, for best practical purposes getting through the course, you know, having an understanding of HTML coding will help the student as they progress through moving into HTML5 and CSS3. With that being said, then, you know, we really see this as a progressional series course, with someone going through the Site Development Associate, CIW Site Development Associate course first, getting an introduction to web design overall, understand the basic syntax of coding a page using HTML, understanding what a tag is, what an element is, and how you put that into a tag with attributes and values, and basically build a standard page. And then complete that course, and then move into the Advanced HTML5 CSS3 Specialist course. With that said, you know, this is a course to, again, help build real world versus theoretical. So we're as Patrick was mentioning, we're talking about the previous versions of CSS that's in the course. We're talking about previous versions of HTML and how all of this works together, because these are employability skills. As we mentioned, someone's going to be able to go out into the real world and be placed in an environment where they may not be using HTML5, but their role is to update a particular site or work on a project and updating a site. So they're going to be able to have the skill sets by going through the Site Development Associate course and then the Advanced HTML CSS3 Specialist course and have a firm understanding of web design concepts and principles. It can be a standalone course. Again, it might have a little bit higher of a learning curve with someone having to go back and do a little bit of prep work as far as being able to work with elements in the coding format. But again, it can be used in that way if a particular institution was only using, if they had one web design class that they were able to offer, then I would definitely take a look at possibly being able to implement this based on the types of students that are coming into it. And of course, we can talk about this in more detail. I'm happy to talk with anyone if you want to contact me, and we can go into more detail about positioning. Todd, you want to see what types of questions we have available?
Sure. Thanks, Patrick and Stephen, for all the information you've shared with us. Lisa, do we have any questions? Anybody have any questions out there as we kind of wrap this up in the next few minutes?
There's been a few questions. Stephen's done a good job of keeping up on a lot of the questions as we go. Just reviewing a few things here to see what hasn't been answered, what has been answered. A couple of questions about pricing. Generally, pricing can vary depending on your location and your organization. I strongly recommend checking in with your account manager to see what the pricing is all about. That was for Rupa Mehta. Kumar Sinha, most recent question, is asking, how does this link to dynamic websites? I had a question about that.
Stephen or Patrick?
Patrick, since you did most of the coursework, I'm going to let you jump in on that.
Okay. Are you saying dynamic? Because the way that I would interpret that is that dynamic would be similar to a responsive website, and that a dynamic site is going to adjust itself to the environment. So when we talk about dynamic, you're going to find that oftentimes included with a media query as well, and that is it identifies, okay, here's the browser that is coming to for information, and so or what type of device it is. The other thing dynamic could be referred to as when you rotate your screen. If you turn your screen from a horizontal to a portrait perspective, how do you do that? And so HTML5 is quite good at that.
Okay, great. Yeah, the one question we see here is the course material available. Yes, it is. The course is available now. All the online resources are available. Contact your sales associate to determine what best delivery method is for you. The exam will be available in September. So those are just a couple things that we have there. Any other questions, Lisa?
Couple of different questions here. There's one about how long are the SDA and HTML5 CSS courses to complete each?
That really kind of depends on the environment that we're going in with. Site development, associate course, I have seen taught within a full semester time frame. Others I've seen applied in an academic calendar year. And then, if you're looking at basically just a training shop, a training environment, it could be implemented within a 5-day boot camp type session. So it really depends on your environment in which you're implementing curriculum. And the same would be true for the Advanced HTML5 course.
Right, and with the material, we provide an implementation table if you're delivering it in more of a boot camp environment to give you an idea of the time period that each lesson would take. We also do provide sample syllabi to help you determine whether you're going to deliver it over a 10-week period or a semester or that type of setting. Okay.
There's a question in here about how do we know who our account manager is?
That's information that we can get for you privately. If you've got questions about that, I'll try to email you after our webinar, and I'll look that information up in our system and find out who that is for you. We have different representatives assigned for different geographies around the world, so it basically depends on where you're located.
And then there's another question in here for exam objectives. When will they be published?
Exam objectives, I believe, are published. If not, we will have them up on the website in the next few days.
I was just checking our website, and it looks like our page for this new course doesn't have objectives just yet, so we'll have to go ahead and get those available to you.
We'll get those. Yeah, we'll get those in the next few days.
Okay. Approximately how much of the course is dedicated to RWD?
Patrick. Approximately.
Hi. Yes. Yeah. The last lesson is where we cover responsive web design. It's lesson 10, and it's pretty much responsive web design is part of the part of what I would call a it's an exercise that the students do. They convert the traditional Habitat for Humanity website into a mobile site. And so, during that process, they're going to be implementing a lot of responsive web design. And the funny thing is they're going to be doing it all throughout the course, but they won't realize that that's necessarily a term that can be applied to it. But we do, especially in lesson 10 is when we focus on that. It's the capstone lab where they actually implement everything. And that's what's really nice about this course. The whole thing builds up to lesson 10. And that's where they implement everything. It's quite nice from an academic, instructional design perspective.
Okay, but it is discussed and covered pretty much throughout. Like you said, they're building up to it.
Correct. All right. Yeah, that is a great thing to, as they go through, they learn all the pieces and bits and the important information to be able to be a good HTML5 CSS3 programmer, to be able to bring these elements together, and then at the end of it, they can see that big picture come together and really complete all the puzzle that they've been working on. That's great. That's great. Thank you. Okay, Lisa, any other questions? As we're almost about 10 minutes over.
There was a question a little bit earlier from Lisa Kulik. It was a question about learning how to create pages for mobile device firstly, so sites are fluid and able to enlarge on larger devices, or the opposite?
Oh yes, we're teaching them both. Yes, we're teaching them both, and that's a lot of the main aspects that we're teaching them is just how to use the framework that I was telling you about with the new HTML5 structure tags, and also using images that resize automatically.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so that is taught throughout the entire course.
So it's fair to say that it really kind of works both ways. It's, you're designing for either platform so that they can work small to large or large to small.
Exactly, that's the goal. Correct.
Cool.
Right. Well, if there's nothing else, we appreciate everybody for staying over a few minutes late. And Lisa, I'll turn it over to you to close us out.
All righty. Thank you very much, Todd and Stephen and Patrick, and we appreciate your participation today. If we weren't able to get to your questions today, we will try to respond to those offline. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today.